For centuries, faith has been praised as the highest virtue, the force that gives meaning when logic falls silent and comfort when facts feel cold. Every civilization, from medieval Europe to modern America, has built temples, cathedrals, and scriptures that place faith above reason. Even scientists like Newton spoke of God's hand in the cosmos. We're taught that faith and science are just two paths to the same truth, one spiritual, one empirical, both equally valid ways to understand reality. But when we actually test that harmony under the microscope, it breaks. The same faith that claims truth begins to crumble, not because science attacks it, but because science exposes what belief must ignore to survive. In this video, we'll trace the hidden fault lines where faith meets evidence, and why, when the two collide, only one can keep standing. If you value truth over comfort, join our channel membership. It helps us keep exploring what most are too afraid to question. Because what you're about to see isn't a war between faith and science. It's the moment belief steps into the light and realizes the light doesn't need belief to exist. There was a time when faith didn't just guide the soul, it defined reality itself. In ancient civilizations, priests weren't just spiritual leaders. They were the astronomers, the physicians, the philosophers. To question them was to question the universe. And in a world without telescopes or microscopes, faith wasn't one way of knowing. It was the only way. Every sunrise was a divine promise. Every storm, a message from the heavens. Every illness, a punishment or a test. Faith was knowledge, and questioning it was heresy. But then, something shifted. The Renaissance cracked open the monopoly. A new kind of curiosity began to whisper. A curiosity that didn't kneel before the altar, but stared through lenses of glass and reason. Science emerged, not as an enemy, but as a competitor for truth. Yet in its early days, even science still spoke the language of faith. Galileo called his telescope a window to God's design. Newton spoke of divine laws woven through the fabric of the cosmos. They still needed heaven to make their discoveries feel safe. But as the experiments grew stronger, the metaphors began to weaken. The Church's explanations, from creation stories to cosmology, could no longer bear the weight of observation. The earth wasn't the center of creation. Miracles began to look like misunderstandings, and divine mystery started to shrink under the light of inquiry. For the first time, truth had two competing sources, faith and evidence. And the more evidence expanded, the smaller faith began to feel. But the real collapse didn't happen in the heavens. It happened inside the human brain. Now we move inward, from the telescope to the mind. Because science doesn't just challenge what religion claims, it challenges how the brain protects those claims. Faith isn't only a belief system, it's a psychological survival mechanism. When evidence threatens it, the brain doesn't surrender. It fortifies. Cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, motivated reasoning. These are not flaws. They're defense systems. When a sacred text says the world is 6,000 years old, and geology says it's 4.5 billion, most believers don't question the text. They question the science. When a miracle is disproven, they don't abandon the belief. They reinterpret the failure. It wasn't God's will. The test wasn't pure enough. The faith wasn't strong enough. Even studies show this strange persistence. When people are presented with evidence that contradicts their faith, the act of seeing the contradiction often strengthens their conviction. The mind twists discomfort into devotion. Because faith offers something facts can't: emotional certainty. And the brain confuses that feeling of certainty with truth itself. It's not lying, it's protecting the self. Doubt feels like betrayal. Skepticism feels like sin. So the mind builds walls, thick, invisible, comforting walls, to keep the truth from getting in. But here's the paradox. Faith requires doubt to exist, but forbids it to survive. It feeds on the tension between not knowing and pretending to know. That's why no amount of evidence ever feels enough. Because faith isn't a conclusion, it's a defense against conclusions. And yet, even as the mind resists, the evidence keeps pushing in. Harder, clearer, impossible to ignore. This is where belief meets data, and the collision is impossible to look away from. 3 moments in human history. 3 fault lines where evidence didn't just challenge faith, it demolished it. First, creation versus evolution. For centuries, holy texts told us we were handcrafted, a separate species, a divine image set apart from the animals. Then came DNA. And the double helix didn't whisper, it shouted. We are not apart from life. We are of it. Our genetic code is 98% identical to chimpanzees and riddled with broken genes shared across countless species. The proof isn't in philosophy, it's in your blood. Every strand of DNA says the same thing. We weren't designed. We evolved. Then, miracle claims versus medical science. Scriptures describe sight restored, disease vanishing, limbs regrown through prayer. And yet, in all of modern history, with billions of believers praying daily, not one documented case exists of a missing limb growing back. Not one. Because medicine can repair, but miracles can't regrow. As technology advanced, faith's last stronghold, the supernatural, shrank into the gaps science hadn't yet filled. And every time a new discovery emerged, another miracle quietly disappeared. Every experiment that works replaces one miracle that doesn't. And finally, divine order versus quantum chaos. Faith insists there's a plan, that everything happens for a reason. That order proves a designer. But at the subatomic level, the universe stops following anyone's rules. Particles blink in and out of existence. Events happen without cause. Reality itself becomes a probability wave. It's not perfect order. It's perfect unpredictability. The deeper science looks, the less divine intention it finds, and the more it sees elegant, indifferent mathematics governing everything. Each discovery adds weight. Each revelation tightens the pressure. And under that weight, faith begins to buckle. But the story isn't about science defeating faith. It's about why faith can't adapt without destroying itself. Faith has always claimed to be eternal, unchanging, absolute. But when its claims start to crumble under evidence, something fascinating happens. It begins to adapt. Not by discovering new truths, but by rewriting old ones. When evolution became undeniable, religious leaders shifted the language. God works through evolution, they said. He guided natural selection. When cosmology replaced creation myths, the response was, science explains how, faith explains why. And when miracles stopped standing up to scrutiny, they quietly became metaphors. The Red Sea didn't part. It symbolizes liberation. The resurrection isn't historical, it's spiritual renewal. This is the survival strategy. Each reinterpretation is a way of staying relevant without admitting defeat. Each poetic turn of phrase is another retreat from literal truth, but every retreat weakens authority, because every verse rewritten is another white flag. If divine revelation were truly timeless, it wouldn't need constant translation. It wouldn't evolve only after science does. Faith doesn't lead discovery. It follows it, adjusting its story to fit the new reality that evidence already revealed. And with every adjustment, the illusion of divine certainty fades a little more. If that's the pattern, what happens when faith runs out of places to hide? Science is no longer outside the church walls. It's inside them, in seminaries, in classrooms, in households where questions echo louder than prayers. For the first time, believers don't need to take anyone's word for truth. They can look it up. A teenager in biology class sees the tree of life and realizes it looks nothing like Genesis. She asks her teacher quietly, "If evolution is true, what happens to Adam and Eve?" The teacher hesitates, then says softly, "Science doesn't need them to explain us." That night, she stares at her ceiling, and something she never expected begins to unravel. Not her morals, not her purpose, just her certainty. In another town, a pastor sits in his study after Sunday service. His Bible is open, but his laptop glows with scientific journals. He's been reading about human origins, about fossils older than his faith allows. And though he'll never say it aloud, he knows evolution makes sense. He feels it in the honesty he's afraid to voice. These aren't stories of rebellion. They're stories of awakening. Because once evidence walks into the pulpit, the sermon starts to sound different. Faith leaders try to modernize, to make belief fit the age of information. But every attempt to sound relevant exposes deeper fractures beneath the surface. You can't keep rewriting Revelation without revealing who's really holding the pen. And so, quietly, congregations shrink. Doubt spreads faster than doctrine, and the authority that once commanded nations now struggles to fill a pew. The collapse isn't violent, it's silent, private, personal. And in that silence, after the last sermon ends, something more honest begins to speak. The collapse of faith is not the end of something. It's the beginning of something real. Because rejecting faith isn't nihilism. It's intellectual adulthood. It's the moment curiosity finally replaces obedience. When wonder no longer needs permission to exist. For centuries, we were told that without faith, life would lose meaning. That science strips the soul and logic drains the beauty from the world. But that was never true. Science doesn't kill awe. It refines it. It gives mystery depth. It gives questions the dignity of pursuit. You don't need to imagine a creator to feel reverence for creation. You don't need heaven to be moved by the infinite, because meaning isn't handed down. It's built through discovery, connection, and the courage to admit, I don't know, but I want to find out. Faith asks you to surrender mystery to certainty. Science asks you to explore mystery without pretending you've solved it. If you believe curiosity deserves a voice louder than fear, join our membership. It helps us keep that light burning. The collapse of faith isn't the end of wonder. It's where wonder finally becomes honest.